Good day and welcome to my channel. In today's video we are going to be looking at Thunderbolt, specifically Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4. And the main question that we are going to answer is whether this is a technology that you should be considering. Let's get into it. Now, as is the case with all technologies, the one thing that people often ask is this something that we really need? Looking at Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4, these two technologies function at about 40 gigabits per second, which is insanely fast. Do we really need those kinds of speeds? I don't know. Before we can do that, we need to look at what Thunderbolt actually is, what it allows us to do, what it enables us to do. And I think that technology, if anything, should be an enabler. It should allow us to do more things, to do better things, to do them quicker, and to do them with less fuss. Does Thunderbolt allow us to do that? Especially Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4. And then once we've had a look at that, we will look at whether this is something that you should be considering. Alright, so as I've already mentioned, Thunderbolt allows us to transfer data at about 40 gigabits per second. Now, to put that in perspective, 40 gigabits is the equivalent of 5 gigabytes per second. So if you were to imagine that you had a Thunderbolt 3 flash drive, right, and that Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 4 flash drive has information on it of about 128 gigabytes, and that's the maximum capacity of that drive, and you needed to transfer that to another hard drive where you normally store all of your stuff for longer term storage, and that other hard drive is also Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 4. That means that you would be able to transfer all of your data from your thumb drive or your flash drive onto your hard drive, and you would be able to do that at 40 gigabits per second or 5 gigabytes per second. Now, Intel has mentioned that with the minimum requirements, you should be able to transfer data between Thunderbolt devices, between Thunderbolt hard drives, at a rate of about 3 gigabytes per second. For these transfer rates, you're looking at anywhere between 3 gigabytes per second and 5 gigabytes minus 3%, and that 3% is what the technology uses to ensure that the transfer actually happens and does a whole bunch of technical things, which I won't get into with you right now. So you're looking at anywhere between 3 and 5 gigabytes per second, which means that if you were looking at the very best devices, and if such a device were to exist, it probably would be really expensive, but you're looking at about 5 gigabytes per second to transfer 128 gigabytes of data. Now, that data could be video, music, it could be photos, projects, whatever data is on there. At the maximum rate allowed by Thunderbolt, you're looking at about 27 seconds. At the average that at the minimum specifications that Intel has recommended, you're looking at 3 gigabytes per second, which means that will take about somewhere between 40 and 50 seconds to transfer 128 gigabytes. That is insanely fast. Insane. Now, of course, whether or not we'll all have devices, Thunderbolt devices that are able to function at those speeds, that will all depend on how deep our pockets are. But let's not talk about that right now. The other thing that Thunderbolt devices allow is it allows you to daisy chain devices. Now, daisy chaining devices would be you have your laptop and you have your whole bunch of devices that you want to connect. So what you do is for daisy chain you can connect up to 6 devices, maximum of 6 devices. So that's your computer plus 6 other devices. So you'd connect your computer via Thunderbolt to your first device that also has Thunderbolt ports. Each one of these devices would need to have 2 ports besides for your laptop. That if that just has one, that would be fine. So you connect your first device to your laptop via any one of the Thunderbolt ports and a Thunderbolt cable, and then using the other Thunderbolt port, you connect that to another Thunderbolt device, and you keep on doing that up until you reach your sixth device, at which point you've reached your limit, and that's what it is to daisy chain your devices. So that's one thing that Thunderbolt allows. The other way in which you can connect your devices is via a Thunderbolt docking station, and I will show you an image of what this docking station, of what a potential docking station looks like. A docking station allows you to connect various types of devices. So that would be USB 2.0, USB 3.0, maybe HDMI, maybe DisplayPort. It would have Thunderbolt ports as well, and USB-C, all depending on what the particular docking station that you are looking for allows you to connect with. Now the other thing, so then what you would do is you would connect all of your existing peripherals. So if you have an existing USB device that uses that type A or type B connectors, those square connectors, you could connect that into the dock, Bob's your uncle, and it will work at the whatever speed that device is. So if that is a USB 2.0 device that you are connecting to a USB 3.1 port, that will then work at the USB 2.0 speed. That's the way in which things generally work. So you have your dock is connected to your computer, and then you have all of these other devices that are connecting into your dock. Now the maximum bandwidth that would be allowed, the maximum throughput speed that would be allowed would be 40 gigabits per second. If you start exceeding that, which would be extremely difficult, unless of course you're one of those people that has lots and lots of data that you need to send through. If you were to get close to the limits of what Thunderbolt allows, it then starts throttling and says, okay, fine, what needs priority? So for video, it gives video the priority, and then it sets that to, if you have one display or two displays, it will work, and then it will limit the amount of data that can be sent through. If you try to connect more than two displays and there isn't sufficient bandwidth, then the additional displays won't work. And not all of these devices will support more than one 4K display. So if you have multiple 4K displays and the docking station that you are using, or the device that other Thunderbolt device that you are using only supports one 4K display, then if you try to connect any other 4K displays, the additional 4K displays will be disabled. So that's how the docking stations work. So you can connect more than, so the nice thing about the docking station is that you can connect much more than just 6 devices, which is a limitation of the daisy chaining. So that limitation does not apply to the docking stations. Then, so those are some of the benefits that Thunderbolt 3 allows. So what about Thunderbolt 4? Thunderbolt 4 basically has the exact same speed, and this is the next version of Thunderbolt that will be coming out. It has the exact same maximum speed of 40 gigabytes per second that Thunderbolt 3 has. And actually, let's have a look at that Thunderbolt specification, because I believe I do have that right here. So let me read to you what, and you will see this on the screen. These are the differences, or these are the various specifications of Thunderbolt 4 and Thunderbolt 3. You'll see that there's also USB 4 and USB 3 on there, and that will be for another video. But for today, we'll just look at the Thunderbolt 3 and the Thunderbolt 4 stuff. So as you can see there, first thing, one universal computer port. So this is the USB-C type connector that both Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4 has. Now with Thunderbolt 4, there's a 2 meter long cable that that you can use with Thunderbolt 4. With Thunderbolt 3, the cables are a lot shorter. Then there's accessories with 4 Thunderbolt ports that applies to Thunderbolt 4. With Thunderbolt 3, I think, well, the specification doesn't say what the minimum is, but usually Thunderbolt 3 has about at least 1 port, but normally 2 ports. Then the minimum speed requirements there is 40 gigabits per second, as I said. The minimum video requirements are 2 4K displays for Thunderbolt 4, and for Thunderbolt 3, 1 4K display. Now, what that does not mean is that it doesn't mean that you must have 4K displays for your videos, or you don't need to have a 4K display at all. That just specifies what the minimum is that these versions of Thunderbolt will support. And then there's also PCI Express. On the Thunderbolt 4, that's 32 gigabytes per second, and Thunderbolt 3, that's 16 gigabits per second. And again, the Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4, whatever the Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4 both support up to USB 4.0, so that isn't something that we really need to be overly concerned with. And then the minimum PC port power for accessories is 15 watts, which is, according to this documentation, which is a little bit better than what you have on USB 4 and USB 3. If you look at other documentation, we might have some other figures. Based on other information that I've seen on the internet, Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4 both actually support USB 4. So I think that this documentation was created prior to the USB 4.0 being finalized. So what does there's also one other thing that they've mentioned there, is that there's one cable type. They both use Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4 both use the USB-C type connector, and I will put up an image on the screen to show you what that connector looks like. Now, the one really nice thing about Thunderbolt 4 is that with Thunderbolt 4, you can use the Thunderbolt 4 cable for all of your devices. So if you are connecting USB, if you're connecting Thunderbolt, DisplayPort, HDMI, whatever you want to connect, you can use, as long as it has the USB-C connector, you can use that same Thunderbolt 4 cable. Now, what that means for the average user is that you just need to, you don't really care, you don't have to look into your case to see, okay, fine, do I have a USB 2.0 cable, do I have the USB 3.0 cable? You can use the Thunderbolt cable for all of your peripherals. That's one of the really cool things about Thunderbolt 4.0, which also means that it makes your whole cable management thing a whole lot simpler. You have one cable and one cable type. You don't need to walk around with multiple different types of cables. However, Thunderbolt cables and Thunderbolt stuff generally are a little bit more expensive, but I think that expense might be worth the convenience that it provides. With Thunderbolt 3, you still need to ensure that you have the correct cable for so you would need to have at least a Thunderbolt 3 cable, or set some Thunderbolt 3 cables and USB-C type cables, so USB-C 4.0 maybe, and all of the other devices might work with it. I'm not too sure about that just yet, but I am busy doing my research on that for the next video that will deal with USB-C. So, is Thunderbolt something that you should be considering? One of the big problems with Thunderbolt is its cost. Now, the cost is, I think where the cost really comes in is more on the peripherals and not so much on the laptop or the desktop. In the research that I've done, I've seen, I could build a desktop machine, a PC desktop machine, for under 10,000 Rand, maybe even for as little as anywhere between 5 to about 10,000 Rand. For my American friends, you can do, or yeah, for everybody else in the world, I don't know what the various currencies are that you guys use, but as of the making of this video, the Rand to dollar currency exchange rate is about 14.67. So you can do the math and you'll see what that turns out to be in terms of dollars or pounds or whatever. So for anywhere between I think between 5,000 and about 10,000 Rand, I could create an entry level computer that has, not create, I could build an entry level computer that has Thunderbolt either built in or added on. And that's pretty decent, especially when you consider what the Mac Mini costs that has Thunderbolt as well. That's much cheaper than anything that you could get from Apple. So in terms of just having the ability to use Thunderbolt, that's the price of that has come down significantly over the past few years. However, the peripherals are still a problem. And as I mentioned, the only real peripheral that you will need is a docking station. And if you are making use of Thunderbolt 4.0, you maybe wouldn't even need a docking station. All depending on how many peripherals you had, etc., etc. So there's, from that perspective, Thunderbolt is quite appealing in that having a Thunderbolt-enabled computer or laptop, desktop or laptop, is not as expensive as it once was. So you could still make use of all of your other devices and have Thunderbolt capability. And then if the need should ever arise for you to purchase a Thunderbolt peripheral, whether it's an audio interface or whatever the case might be, audio interface, hard drive, maybe a monitor, whatever, then you would have the freedom to do that. So unless you have really deep pockets, Thunderbolt peripherals generally it's not going to be something that most people would want to get. However, if you do want the latest, greatest, and best displays, fastest hard drives, and you want all of that, and you have the money for it, then sure, then Thunderbolt is definitely something that you should consider. But as I mentioned, for those of us who are on a budget, we can still have the Thunderbolt capability without necessarily using all of the Thunderbolt capability. Then another group of users that Thunderbolt would be really good for are for people that have large data requirements, where they need to be copying data, moving data across various drives from various computers. They have, whether if the cost justifies the time saving that they will have, then Thunderbolt would also be a really good bet for them as well. So I look at my particular situation. I have an audio interface that, when I looked at it, it had all of the features that I want. The only thing that I was really concerned with was the fact that it also used Thunderbolt. And when I heard about the fact that Thunderbolt is coming to PC, I thought, in the future I'll be able to definitely use it to its fullest potential. And now that Thunderbolt, I have a Thunderbolt card in my machine, and I'm able to use my audio interface without having the MacBook present, which is really fantastic. And the reason why I bought that interface, even though it did cost a pretty penny, was that it had some really amazing features that other interfaces that were much cheaper just didn't have. So this had everything that I wanted, and it had Thunderbolt. Now, if I hadn't bought the Thunderbolt computer, I would be forced to still be in the Mac ecosystem, which is quite expensive. So by me purchasing the Thunderbolt desktop machine, I've made it possible for me to wean myself off of the need for Apple's products. I can still use it if I want to, but I'm not forced to make use of an Apple computer. So this is the beauty of the of Thunderbolt being available to PC users. That's that we now have access to a host of devices that previously was only for Mac users. And one other thing that I need to mention is that not all Thunderbolt devices will necessarily work with the PC enabled Thunderbolt devices. So for instance, this USB 3 to USB 2 adapter that I have from Apple doesn't allow me the full capabilities of my Thunderbolt connection. So that's another thing that you need to keep in mind. Whatever Thunderbolt devices you get, you need to ensure that that device will work on Windows machines, Windows or Linux or whatever other operating systems you are using. So if you have something that works on Windows machines and you intend on using that on a Mac, before you go ahead and buy it, you need to first determine, will these two things work? So there's a whole bunch of things that you need to consider. Now, for my friends who maybe would not be able to afford the Thunderbolt ecosystem, there's no shame in that, no shame whatsoever. For those of you who can't afford that, I've got a little something for you in my next video that will be dealing with USB-C. So if you feel like, I can't really afford and I'm not really interested in getting involved in that expensive Thunderbolt ecosystem, there is an alternative for you, my friend, and that is called USB 4.0. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this, and I will catch you in the next video. Please remember to like, subscribe, and to leave some comments if you have any questions, any suggestions that you have for how I can improve this channel. Maybe even potentially... let's not talk about the name of the channel just yet. So if you have any questions, any suggestions of how I can improve the channel, or if you would like to make some comments about some of the things that I've said, please feel free to comment below, and let's talk. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for watching, guys.